The hosts and guests on Everything's Messy podcast are not licensed healthcare professionals. The discussions in our episodes are not personalized medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for medical guidance. Never delay seeking professional medical advice or emergency assistance because of our podcast. We encourage consulting with a healthcare professional before making any significant health changes. By listening to our podcast, you agree to the disclaimer. Thank you for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Hey, welcome to Everything's Messy podcast, where we celebrate the beautiful but messy life experiences that most, if not all, people go through. Get ready to embark on an exciting journey through the raw and unfiltered stories of everyday people. Here, we dive into messy realities of life, from making messy mistakes to triumphs and everything in between. Are you sensing a theme? That's right, it's messy. But this just isn't about the mess. It's about finding strength and resilience in the midst of it all. We'll explore how health, fitness, and wellness play a crucial role in navigating life's twists and very messy turns. And we'll challenge conventional systems, because sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest discoveries. Join us as we embrace the messy, beautiful, and endlessly fascinating stories. Each episode is a testament to the power of our messy journeys and the beauty that emerges from the mess. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee, sparkling water, whatever it may be, and prepare to be inspired. Are you ready? Let's get messy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Everything's Messy podcast. I am your messy host, Sarah. So today I have Jeff Bailey, an expert in the field of joint health and bone strength, and author of Mobility for Life, which I can't wait to get into the mobility part of it. And we've talked a lot about that on this show, but I think getting into the joint health and the bone strength and things like that is going to be really important. And, you're not a stranger to the messy story. So let's get started and get messy with Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Happy to be here on your messy show.
I appreciate it. We
It's just
like to
honest,
get
right?
messy. So yeah, welcome. And I always like guests to kind of tell us, because I noticed in the wellness space, they kind of have a reason that propels them into the wellness space. It's not something they typically wake up and say, this is what I want to do. It sort of puts them into that element. So if you want to start with your messy part, which I read it was pretty messy.
And that's the word of the day. I love it. I will get into my story, but I first want to say, as we were kind of saying hi, getting started here, it occurred to me there's micro mess and there's macro mess.
I love it.
And my day today has been micro messy. It's been off, and I've been feeling kind of unproductive and just a little bit off. And then I started looking forward to our podcast, and everything kind of started to brighten up. And I realized the joy that comes through and just really being able to share in a really honest way. And I think that's the aim of your show with such an honest title like that. And
I love it. I love it because whether people want to admit it or not, life is messy, and
yeah,
it could be a small mess. It could be a giant mess, but either way, good luck.
yeah, it comes out of the blue sometimes, kind of like today was for me. And so thank you for being part of the uplift here for
Yeah,
me.
I'm so
Uh,
glad. I really
yeah,
liked how you said macro, micro. I'll have to steal that.
yeah. And now we'll get into the macro, the big, I'll preface it by saying it took me a while to realize this, but I believe it fully in my heart that there are no accidents. Nothing happens by accident. So, but I'll often say there may be injuries, but no accidents. And that's how a couple significant injuries really changed my life. The first was a knee injury that led me to the world of rolfing. I studied rolfing in my late 20s, early 30s, and had a
So
career in that.
expound upon that a little bit for people
Yeah,
who may not know
rolfing
what
is a
that
form
is.
of body work where Ida Rolf was the pioneer of rolfing, and she really put fascia, the shiny white stuff, in the minds of body workers. It's the shiny white stuff that changes. Okay, muscles really don't have a stretchable quality to them, and yet that's what we tend to target. And in rolfing school, I brought my 10 years of yoga practice to rolfing, and it really changed my perspective. I thought, okay, I know muscles don't really technically stretch, but that's what a lot of people target. How can we find a way in our yoga to target the fascia, which, as Ida taught us to do, it was one generation of teachers that taught me how to do. you apply a little bit of pressure to the fascia, and then you ask for movement. So it's movement, a little time and pressure that change the way that we're organized. And it just so happens that a lot of the pain receptors and the proprioceptors are in the fascia. So that's why there's this thing now called myofascial release and different techniques to release fascia. And so that had a big impact on my yoga. And I can keep talking unless you want to ask a question or take.
No, I'm absorbing what you're saying, and I think one of the questions is, well, let's start with, I don't know if I want to ask that yet. Let's just go on with your story of kind of the injury that started and what you were doing, and then how you kind of discovered I think at one point you mentioned joints like pressure, and I think that's something that we need to get into as well.
Which for me is a revolutionary idea. So let's see. I'll tell you how I came to realize that. Some years later, I was skiing. It was another ski accident, high-speed collision with my skiing partner, Philippe. We hit hips, going very quick, fast on big GS turns, and just a lot of impact to the hip, pain galore. Had a hard time walking, and did all the natural courses. Saw the doctor. Doctor said PT. You're probably going to need a hip replacement someday. Just a lot of trauma and a torn labrum and things like that. And but I was 50 at the time, and I just thought to myself, this is not right. This is not part of my plan.
Yeah.
It's way too young to have this. Even the doctor said, no, it's going to take some time. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to use that time to figure this out. And I went through all the conventional things. Went to a good PT. The yoga that I had known, Rolfing, everything helped a little bit, but nothing really got to the sciatic pain and the consistent limp that I was having and things like that. And so
yeah, I can't imagine the pain. I mean, when you just think skiing in general, when you're upright and can do it, there's still pain with the way you have to bend your body, but then getting into an accident, I can't even imagine.
It's intense. Yeah. But then after, a month or so, then we're stuck with this thing called chronic pain.
Mm-hmm.
Acute pain is one thing, but then chronic just becomes this big mystery. How do I get to it? And so I just went deep into my heart one day at the end of a yoga class, and I just asked the universe for a better way. I said, I really need an answer to this. And some days, maybe a week or 10 days later, I was in another yoga class, sitting cross-legged, a lot the way I am sitting now. And a lot of times I'll mimic with my arms here. When we sit cross-legged, we pull the heels in close like this because it's comfortable and doable. But if you move the feet out and away, now you get into brand new territory in your hips and sometimes even your knees and ankles. And that's the position I found myself in. And the sensation was a little bit painful and uncomfortable. But then I heard that intuitive voice that said, stay, this is your answer. And so I stayed in it and even took it a little bit deeper. And this is how I call it healing sensation. That's the one thing we learn in the Avita Yoga practice, is how to discern between something that's not helpful and kind of painful and pushy versus something helpful in the form of healing sensation. But how you might be getting a massage and you're getting some pressure into a trigger point or something, and we've all probably said, wow, that hurts so good.
Yes. Yes.
They're nodding. Yeah, I know what that feels like.
Stop, but don't stop.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's a feeling of, oh my God, yeah, more time, go deeper. That feels so good. And then sometimes you want to move a little bit with it. Well, that's oftentimes when we experience that, that's a trigger point. That's something in the muscles. And that's pretty helpful and pretty awesome. We can find very, very similar sensations and relief by targeting the joints.
Wow.
And so Avita Yoga is not a strength and stretch program. It's not something where we try to get sweaty and burn calories or anything like that. It's very therapeutic. It's slow and it's deep. And so I've found a way to systematically work all through the body. I've resolved knee arthritis for myself, some shoulder issues from playing racket sports as a kid. And as I began sharing this with people, my yoga classes started growing exponentially. Um, and
So that was going to be my next question. The component when we talk about arthritis is really just inflammation of the joints. And so this practice that you're doing, what it like releases the inflammation? What is the science behind it?
yeah, okay, excellent question. So there is a chapter in my book dedicated to that very question. And I call it the healing physiology of joints, or sometimes I call it the healing physiology of Avita Yoga. I'll give it to you in a nutshell. All the articular joints have a capsule around them. It's called the synovial membrane. And that membrane is it holds the synovial fluid inside the joint. You picture that?
Yeah,
Do
okay.
you know?
I mean, I'm going back to A&P class right now and picturing it, but yes.
Yeah, I can see the look in your eyes. Yeah, you're visioning. Yeah. So there's a joint capsule that contains the synovial fluid, and that wraps every single articulating joint in your body, whether it's the joint in the end of your finger, your knuckle, your elbow, your shoulder, your hip, uh, even where a rib head contacts a vertebrae. There's a little tiny membrane, and inside is the fluid. The fluid is both a source of nutrients to keep the inside of the the joint, the cartilage and everything happy and healthy.
So
But
it's like the lubrication.
it's a lubrication, but that's where the hyaluronic acid is that we love, and collagen fibers and all the things that we love that keep us healthy uh, is in the fluid. And so it's absorbed into the cellular, into the cartilage and all the things inside the joint. Okay. But everywhere there's a metabolic process in the body, everywhere there's energy created, or everywhere there's a cell or something being renewed or generated, there's always going to be a waste product. Okay. Like
Okay.
every little cell is like a factory,
Okay.
and it's producing energy or producing a product, renewing itself, something like that. And that creates, there's always going to be a waste byproduct. And the body, as we know, has lots of ways to get rid of waste byproducts. We have the lymphatic system, the urinary system, all the different systems. Eventually it gets out of the body. Well, how do you think the waste byproducts make their way out of the synovial fluid into the rest of the lymphatic system or the vascular system to be cleansed?
I'm gonna guess it's absorbed in the joint.
Yeah. Well, no. That's what tends to happen, and that's what causes arthritis.
Okay, that's the
If
inflammation.
that,
Okay.
let's just say, you got this contained environment inside the cell membrane. If the toxins start to build up in there, what's going to happen? Degradation. In my feeling, arthritis is nothing more than a toxic environment inside of a cell, inside of a joint. And so, and I've learned that over many, many years of talking with many clients and many students and asking questions. Because if you go online and search the cause of arthritis, you'll hear things like overuse and
Sure.
repetitive stuff, and the whole list. But they're not consistent. I've known very flexible people who don't even exercise that much who have arthritis.
Mm.
And then they jump immediately to, oh, well, it must be genetic, or it must be
Autoimmune or
autoimmune. Now, autoimmune is a different story. That is a version of arthritis that is different than what we're talking about. It plays a role, and we can help with symptoms of that, but we can't really completely resolve it. And if you catch osteoarthritis, that's the kind I'm talking about here. If you catch osteoarthritis soon enough, it'll resolve with time and pressure. You just got to keep coming back to it.
That's
And
interesting.
lastly, to answer the question, to wrap it all up, it's pressure. Like if you just make a strong fist and you hold that fist for a minute to 2 minutes, that's how much time it takes to really activate the process and get it to happen. The toxins are moved through the synovial membrane, picked up by the lymphatic system and the vascular system, where it's taken away and dealt with and cleansed. And when the synovial membrane detects a void inside the joint, now there's a void of fluid, it produces new, fresh fluid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the science is there, all the research is there. I've talked to many doctors about it, and they all nod their head and agree. But we're still afraid to put a little pressure into the joint, especially when it's painful. And that's the skill we learn how to do.
Okay. So, and then I would suspect then that you're working on different joints as you teach your class, right? It might be like we're doing knee joints today, or I'm sure it'd probably be very difficult to do like a whole body one because there's so many areas that you'd have to work on. So you're kind of targeting these areas, I would think.
Yes, there are many ways to target hips. There's many ways to target every joint in the body. And you're asking really deep questions.
Oh,
I'm
not sure if that's good or not.
It's good. And because it's a tricky answer. You're just going to have to try a class and feel. And that's where this is the point where I'm trying to explain it to somebody on the street. And I always have a card and I say, here, go try a free class.
Sure.
It's so much easier
It's
just to
harder to explain.
because there's no paradigm like it. Well, it's interesting, Sarah. Sometimes we are able to address many joints simultaneously, even though we're targeting one in particular.
Okay.
I could jump on my mat here and show you a few shapes. I don't know if you want to do that.
Well, so it's almost like, and I'm just loosely comparing this, but sort of getting it in my head when we talk about like reflexology, where one part of your body that you push would affect another part of the body. So it's kind of like that, I'm assuming, in a loosely comparatively way.
Yeah, very loose. So when we think bones and joints, we think structure. It's like structure. And the way we contact them is either passively or actively, because passive impact on a joint is a different quality than active. Okay, so not only are we cleansing the joint, but we are also restoring range of motion, and sometimes another medical term, we're remodeling the joint. So a hip joint, for example, is supposed to be spherical, but the way when we walk, it just goes in one direction all the time. If we run, walk a little faster, even ride a bike, it doesn't change that much. And so it's the unused parts of a joint that are oftentimes the ones that get arthritic first. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And
that's why hip injuries are so much more a big canon event in somebody's life, because you're using a joint or you hurt something that hasn't been used in a while.
It's the biggest joint in the body. It's the most central joint in the body. So all the different traumas find their way there somehow. And the moment we start to favor or limp or simply limit our range of motion, then the unused parts start to become arthritic. They become a little degenerative, soft, whatever. It really, in some ways, boils down to, if you don't use it, you start to
lose it. Yeah. Okay, so let me switch a little bit, because I think this is a really interesting topic. When we talk about mobility versus flexibility, because part of me says they kind of go hand in hand, but you're also working two different, what we call structures, right? So what can you explain a little bit about that?
Another great question. Yeah. So the problem with yoga, okay, is that everybody thinks flexibility. If you say, come to my yoga class, to somebody in their 40s or 50s, and they don't know what you're talking about, they're just gonna say, no, I'm not flexible enough, or I'm not mobile enough. And so then I started thinking, saying you're not mobile enough or flexible enough to go to yoga is kind of like saying I'm too sick to go to the hospital. It's not the right approach. But I get it because so much yoga out there it targets the muscles and it pushes for flexibility. And like I opened the show with, I really strongly believe muscles are not designed to stretch. So if they're not designed to stretch, how do we make a significant change in the body? So we really endorse that idea and we stop trying to stretch muscles. And instead, we just have these different shapes. They're very doable shapes. If you can't sit on the floor, you sit on a bolster. If you can't sit on a bolster, you sit in a chair. There's always a way to find an entry point into the actual restriction, which is almost always in the fascial connections around the joints, because fascia gets denser the closer you get to the joints. So then when we start to target them, and by the way, fascia just has proprioceptors in it. It doesn't really have the kind of stretch reflectors that get all these sort of, I'm going into a whole nother category here, but if you stretch a muscle too fast, it actually constricts. And so we don't fight that.
We talk a lot about don't stretch cold muscles. Even after you've warmed them up, it's, it's not, I mean, there are some people that can do it, but it's really, you have to be very careful with stretching it.
You do. And so then, okay, well, we're targeting the fascia around the joints. We're targeting the joint itself. Now, we find that entry point. 90+% of the Avita Yoga practice is done with your eyes closed. You're relaxed. You let your breathing slow down. You let your heart rate slow down. Everything slows down. And you pay very close attention to the sensation. That's the one skill. As I move in this shape a little bit, what do I feel? Because I'm going into the joint, I'm going into the problematic area. There's the sweet spot. So we camp out there for a while, we breathe, and we let the silence be golden. And then we come out, and then we go to another shape. And sometimes the shape that we just did has an influence on the next one. And it's super cool. I mean,
so I'm starting to see it's sort of progressive, right? Every movement leads to something, or the next movement, something like that. I know when I first started yoga, only a couple of years ago, but I kept thinking I'm twisted up in a pretzel and I have to untwist somehow. And so my first thought was to go, oh, I need more flexibility. Wait, no, I need more mobility. And I think that's what starts to happen with especially new beginners. We kind of get lost in the minutia, if you will, of which way we're supposed to go and bend and turn and follow. And so as I hear you and the expert that you are, I just want to encourage people, start wherever you're at. And don't put the expectation on yourself. If you allow your body to do what you know it to do, it will come. But it does take practice. It is a practice, a modality for sure.
Yeah, that's it. I often say during a class, don't push the shape. Let the yoga come to you. And that's kind of what you just said. We can actually start to rest into the sensation and trust that we're lighting up our physiology inside, and that everything is going to work for us instead of trying to strive for a particular look. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So as you sort of discovered this new way, or new to you anyway, and as you're coming out of the injuries that you had occurred, what sort of relief are you seeing, and how long did that take?
Oh man, for me, and this may sound too good to be true, but for me and for many people, the pain can be alleviated quickly.
Wow.
My pain.
That's a pretty strong statement.
I know. The pain dropped off in a matter of days. And that's what really drew me back into the practice.
Of course.
And that's what keeps a lot of people coming back. But here's the thing. Pain is just a messenger. Pain is not the problem. And we're so conditioned to numb it, alleviate it, cut it out, or kill it, So So now we take a whole different approach. And it's not to say that surgery and medications aren't helpful and they aren't part of someone's path. But regardless, if you start to embrace the pain a little bit and let it lead you in, that's when good things happen. And so even though the pain is resolved, for me and for many people, isn't grounds to just stop practicing. It's like, oh, the pain's gone, I'm good. See you later.
Right. It's like stopping to exercise.
There are plenty of students who do that, and that's fine. But usually there's still something there. You get enough change for the pain receptors to stop popping, but still there's a restriction there. And you want to keep coming back to really resolve the restriction. And let's, go back to the important stuff of conditioning the inside of your joint and putting the pressure, healthy pressure, into the cartilage and into the bone, because that's what stimulates cartilage and bone strength is pressure. We know that about bones.
Yeah.
The joint is part of the bone.
Right.
The end.
Right. And so when we're specifically like, if you're, working out or you have tight hips, they always tell you, well, you have to stretch your hip flexor and things like that. But I'm starting to think maybe that's sort of a misnomer or, misinformation, because if we're really just focused on the joint, you have to, like you said, remodel that so you have more flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. So we target the joint. Let's say, use your hip example. My hip flexors feel tight. I have a hard time standing up. So if the hip flexors are tight, that means I'm having a hard time staying upright, right? Make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's
or there's pain, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you stand up, it kind of pulls people over. That's what I call the primary pattern. It's gravity and time just pulling us forward. And it happens pretty subconsciously until one day we're looking in the mirror, we've realized it's kind of gotten to us. And so conventional wisdom would say, oh, let's stretch out the hip flexors. The hip flexors, those are the muscles that flex the hip. They are going to be tighter when there's a hip restriction. But just targeting the muscles is not really going deep enough, because you got to consider the inside of the hip joint has now adapted to the tight muscles. So we still target the hip joint itself. We go for the bones every single time, moment by moment. And oftentimes it will feel like the surrounding tissue. I just call it soft tissue. It could be fascia. It could be muscles.
Sure.
And the muscles are encased in fascia. Every cell is wrapped in a fascial fiber or a fascial structure. So just by slowing down and targeting the bones and the joints, we indirectly start to resolve the restriction and just say the tightness in the hip flexor, for example. And there's other thing that we haven't talked about here, Sarah, and that's the nervous system.
Which plays a role as well.
It's massive. Everything is looped in and governed by the brain and the nervous system. And so we have to go slow enough to include even the nervous system and really start to unwind the pattern all the way back to the mind. And that's it's just a deep and beautiful thing to watch that happen and feel it happen.
Yeah. I'm wondering, so, and you might have a different experience, but just as I think about if my husband were to do it or my dad were to do it, I feel like women would be jumping, like they're the ones filling your studio. How do you get the men in there? Because they do have the hips and the bad knees, and they might be, I mean, we all kind of get battered up in our own different way, but they've got a lot of damage too. How do you get them to be like, trust me on this, let's just try?
Yeah. Well, if I knew the answer to that, I would have a lot more men in class. My wife and I, we're doing a lot of traveling, promoting the book, and I have teachers around the country. And I was just doing a couple workshops in Minneapolis. And she said, Jeff, we got to find a way to get more men in these classes, because the men that are in there, we actually went out to lunch with one of my teachers. Her name is Annie, and her husband, Joe, um, who is a massive fan of the practice. He's so grateful. He and Annie practice with me online, and then he goes to her classes and stuff like that. And he's got the results. He's a huge fan. And I've had men come into classes. To answer your question, they usually finally submit to their wife's bargaining and appeal. They finally submit, okay, I'll try one. And then oftentimes they become converts, because in one class you can feel a difference. And then they get it because they're afraid that they're going to look wrong.
Sure.
They're just afraid of the intimidation. And if you look at the pictures that we see on yoga magazines of, 20-year-olds standing on beaches doing these beautiful poses, you can understand why, because we've really kind of narrowed the yoga market.
Yeah, it was definitely typecast for sure, which is unfortunate. And I will tell on myself, before I started it, I was like, what am I breathing? That's not going to do anything for me. And I really don't think until you, even if it's just the basic model of yoga, until you've actually done it, and then maybe graduated to hot yoga and other things, it's really not only beautiful, but it's not easy. It's hard. And people who think they are in the best shape of their life, or maybe they're, really work out in the gym or whatever it is, and you give them a little bit of yoga and they, can't quite bend that way, or they can't do this, or they do that. It's really difficult, or at least it was for me, to get into some of these positions. My body doesn't, it's starting to now, but that's, I really think, sometimes I'm like, no, it really is warrior pose, because we're doing things that a lot of people can't do.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. And gosh, I'll just say there's some risk with pushing your body to attain those poses when the moment you try to accomplish, you tend to leave some important parts of the equation out. And you can stretch muscles even though they're not designed to. And then when you start pushing the pose, instead of really using it as a diagnostic shape to find out where the restrictions are in a room temperature environment, because the heat gives you a false sense of flexibility.
Yeah, it does.
And then
The
risk is you start to get the flexible places get more flexible and the tight places go unnoticed. And I've been doing this a very, very long time and worked with so many different people. I've had those students in my classes who accidentally find their way into Avita Yoga, and I know they're hot yogis or they're doing all the other fancy stuff. And I can see the tight places. They get revealed, and then they feel uncomfortable. And so they don't often come back.
Yeah.
Because they'd rather go do what they're good at.
Yeah.
So it's a really tricky thing.
It is. And
It's a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah. And I guess I say that to say that maybe men who might not think it's not manly enough or something like that, like, give it a try, because it's not as easy as it looks. And so I say all that to just be like, it's not, it's hard, or at least it was for me.
Yeah. Yeah. This is Avita. I've actually had a high percentage of men in my classes, and maybe it helps being a male teacher. I don't know, but it's really fun. They get some remarkable results, and they're really pleased to know that they don't have to perform, look a certain way, and they can come in their gym. You can come in your, you can wear anything to Avita Yoga. It doesn't matter.
Well, and I'm certainly not picking on men. I just think for those, and even women, like I said, I was one of them that thought this is an exercise. This is just about breathing or stretching or whatever they think it is. No, it's not. Like, it's not for the weak. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and everything we're talking about comes back to the real reason why I wrote Mobility for Life, because there's so many different ways to approach the body and get lasting results that I just had to put it in a book and had to get it down. And I think it's a pretty enjoyable read. It sheds a lot of light on a new way to be healthy and happy.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I love how you've explained everything. I feel like, I always love rabbit holes, so I have a new rabbit hole to jump down, and I always love data on that, so I'm excited for that. And congratulations on the book, of course. So if somebody wants to try this, if somebody wants to work with you, where can they find you?
It's Avita Yoga online.com. And I have, there's a introductory series. It's called Series 1.0, and I take you through the basic concepts. Some of the classes are just 15 minutes long, some are 30 minutes long, just to get you a simple introduction and see the way we use, kind of the unique ways we use um, the simple props like a firm cushion to sit on and a 6-foot belt or strap. We use them in really interesting ways that make the practice doable. No stretching, no pain, just results.
I love that. I love that, and, I think that's important. And then where can they find your book? Is that on the website as well?
Yeah, that's on the website too. Yeah, you can't help but find the book on my website right now. Um, I did get the URL mobilityforlifebook.com. Make a note of that.
Love it.
Um, but all the major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, they all have it. If you buy the book before August 5th, you get a bunch of free bonuses. You get a free class, you get an interview with me where I actually spend as much time as we have talking about our constitutions. I feel that we're born into this life in a body with a certain constitution, and we tend to fall on a spectrum somewhere between rigid and flexible. And if we have a rigid constitution and we try to do the yoga, or we try to do gymnastics or something like that, we get spit out. And then if you're on the flexible end and you try to do something like, really, really flexible people are not skiers. They're not cyclists, because it's just too challenging. They don't like the way their muscles work in those kind of situations. And so I found that when you target the bones and joints, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum. It kind of moves us toward the middle to end up in this really balanced kind of way of being and respecting where we are in our bodies and meeting it where it is perfectly. We don't try to perfect the pose, but we can meet ourselves perfectly, and that makes all the difference.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then I ask all my authors this because I'm in the process of writing a book. What did you think about the actual book writing process? Did you love it? Did you love to hate
Oh,
it? Was it? I ask all my authors this.
yeah. Well, that's a good question. I don't know if it's fair to ask me because I love to write.
Ugh,
I just, when I'm inspired, I actually got this is my second book, and the third book is almost, just needs refined. I'm going to probably release it in the next year or two. But um, I think I read a book when I was a teenager, and it was one of those self-help books. I don't know how I ended up with it, but somewhere in that book, it's the one thing I remember from it. The author said, everybody should write a book. And he planted the seed. And I thought, okay, someday I'm going to write a book. I have no idea what I'm going to write about, but I'm going to write a book. And that seed that got planted, and this is what I would advise anybody who wants to write a book, Sarah, is find a way. Sometimes you just have to start writing,
mhm.
but let it be inspired. Let it come from your heart, and and then it will be enjoyable
I love that.
and flawless, and there will be very little writer's block.
I love
You'll put
that.
it down, come back to it, and it'll flow right again. Yeah.
Well, mine is definitely on the track of being messy. So
Okay.
so that's from my heart, though. It will be
That's it.
messy, but and I just love to speak to other people who've done the process and completed it, where they fall on. I've had some tell me they love to hate it. They loved it like you do. Some people, it was okay. They don't know that they'll write another one. And
Can't
I
wait
just
to read
love,
yours. I
oh,
love it.
thank you.
Yeah.
But I think, like you had said, Everybody should. And I do believe everybody has a story, messy or not, to tell, right? And we can all learn from each other. And I do think that's how we connect. But then also, like we spoke earlier, it's that just start where you're at. Whatever that is,
That's
just
it.
put that first foot forward. And I think that applies to everything.
It applies to everything. Yeah, just, you don't have to, the mistake that we think is we got to solve the problem first. Like I have to, you know, get dressed up or do a certain thing or be a certain way before I go to yoga or go out to eat, or I have to get everything just dialed in before I start this book. Yeah, and that's what makes your show title and your whole program so beautiful. I'll share one more
Yes, please.
quote from a guy named Rory Vaden. He's a kind of a business mentor that I bumped into, and he has this quote. The quote is, "You are best positioned to help the person you once were."
Wow. I
Isn't that
love
cool?
that. That's
Yeah,
so great. That's so great.
because that's
That
what you
that
were just saying about
yeah,
that's why you're here.
I love
That's why
that.
I'm here.
Yeah,
And once we solve a little problem for ourselves, then we just want to share it with the world.
absolutely.
And we
Yeah,
all have that story in us.
100%. Oh, this has been great, Jeff. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing your expertise. I love the content and the topics. I hope somebody, even if it's just one person out there listening, says, I need that. They find you. And I just love everything you're providing. So thank you so much for being on Everything's Messy.
Oh, yeah. My pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Whew, if you made it this far, give yourself a gold star or at least a nap. Honestly, if you showed up today and you were listening, you've already crushed it. I'm so grateful for you listening. If anything, head home, share it, tag me, write it on a sticky note. I don't care. Just don't keep all of this messy goodness to yourself. You can find me on Instagram at Everything's Messy Wellness or over at my website, everythingsmessywellness.com, where I've got resources, coaching, and probably a new rant about blood sugar or something that's just nonsense. It's all waiting for you. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got all of my podcast episodes up there. And I'm on X at Everything's Mess. Or if you just want to send me an email, Sarah at everythingsmessywellness.com. Look, until next time, hydrate, take no crap, and as always, keep it messy.